Good afternoon. My name's Professor Kiran Trahan and I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor for Partnerships and Engagement at York University. I'm delighted to introduce today's event, which is part of York's Festival of Ideas Online. Although in a different format, the festival continues to aim to enhance York's reputation as a city of ideas and innovation through offering the highest calibre of public events. The 2020 festival has over 60 online events, offering an inspiring programme for all ages. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the adventure we're about to take you on. Just a few technical notes. If you are watching live, you can ask questions using the question and answer button on your screen. This will be available throughout the talk, so questions can be asked at any time. Should you have any technical issues, such as loss of Wi-Fi, you can rejoin the event using the original link. Please also remember that today's event is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it again. I'm delighted to introduce to you our two speakers today, Zakia Moulaoui and Miles Goring. Zakia is the CEO and founder of Invisible Cities, and Miles Goring combines his previous life as a banker and his work on homelessness. Zakia, if I could ask you to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing in terms of Invisible Cities.
Thank you for having me today and for the brilliant introduction. My name is Zakia and I am the founder of Invisible Cities, a social enterprise that trains people who have experienced homelessness to become walking tour guides of their own city. After starting in Edinburgh, Scotland, where I'm based, we've moved gradually to other cities in the UK and now operate in Edinburgh still, Glasgow, Manchester, and also York, where Miles is based. I thought I would let you know a little bit about the organisation, the reasons why it was set up, and the work that we're trying to do across all our different locations. And after that, I will have a chat with Miles, directly asking him questions about his experience as an award-winning tour guide with Invisible Cities. So let me share some pictures with you so you get a wee feel of what it is that we do. We are Invisible Cities, like I mentioned, a social enterprise, which means we are a business, a social business with a conscience, and what we do is always reinvest in the people that we work with and invest 100% of our profit into growing the organisation or growing our guides, try to accompany them along a journey of more learning, more developing, but also organise different events in our communities, and I'll touch a little bit on that. I set up Invisible Cities in 2016, and the reason why I wanted to do that was because I had an experience working with another homelessness organisation at an international level, and that organisation was called the Homeless World Cup Foundation. Some of you may have heard about it before. It was uniting projects that all used the power of football to support people who had an experience of homelessness, and doing that in about 72 countries around the world. So homelessness was obviously quite different in Scotland than in France, than in India, than in Mexico, but everybody came together under the one power and joy of football and wanting to share something. And it's at that point that I realized that everybody who was experiencing homelessness had a different story, but at the same time had the same story, because we were all the same and we all experienced things from our human heart and experience. So for me, it was very much using that experience to do something a bit different. Another thing I realized was also that when you experience homelessness, there's a lot of stigma that others can have about it or about you. In some situations, I've witnessed it myself, where people that I would be talking to or working with would be insulted or would be kind of attacked and be told, well, you know, how come you are homeless? Did you not work hard enough in school? Did you not work hard enough at work? And, you know, what happened? There was a lot of guilt sometimes. So it was putting all these ideas together that made me think I would like to do something around breaking down the stigma, and around telling the stories in a positive way, but also in a true, meaningful way. So in 2016, I had a bit of a brainstorming year. And also I wanted to combine my love for traveling with all of this, because to me, travel is a really powerful tool. It brings people together. And I always say the best part of travel is people. I remember the people that I meet along the way, but I don't really remember a flight or a train journey unless it was a really bad one, or a bumpy flight. So I wanted to take that power to create meaningful conversations. And I guess Invisible Cities is all about this, is all about taking you on a tour of a city and making you discover the invisible side, whether that's stories that you didn't know about the place, or making you meet people you didn't know anything about, and making you have conversations around topics you didn't know about, like homelessness, and sometimes like addiction, like mental health, and physical health, etc. After setting up in Edinburgh, we were quite lucky to have the word kind of spread out in other organisations wanting to do different things and wanting to do the same thing as us in Edinburgh back in 2016. But we had Manchester University in particular, and a student from Manchester University approach us and say, how can I do to start similar tours in Manchester? And so we started kind of developing and thinking of that idea of expanding to other cities. So first with Manchester, then Glasgow, and now York. And before COVID happened, we were on track to launch in Cardiff, in Wales. And what we offer is, like any other tour operator, we offer walking tours that you can book online, that you can book via our website, but that you can also book via TripAdvisor, Airbnb, all your online travel agents, the usual ones that you can book via hotels in some places. And we work a lot with tourists, but also locals, because we try to have a flair for unknown facts, invisible stories of the local heritage and the local knowledge, but also of social justice and social issues that the cities may be facing. So we were incredibly lucky again to have multiple awards for innovation in tourism, for doing tourism, I believe, a bit differently, but also a bit socially, for creating sometimes, unknown and unexpected connections between American tourists and Scottish locals, or English locals. And that has helped us grow and helped us spread our message that eventually everybody is different and has a different story, and that everybody deserves to have their voices heard and to say the story that they want to say. And on that note, all our tours are designed by our guides themselves. And that is because we didn't want to put words in people's mouths. It was quite important that all our guides, all our trainees would tell stories that they're passionate about and that they know 100%, and that they have full control over. So you will hear in a minute Miles, for instance, talk about his own tour and the theme of his tour, and that's chosen by everyone and by each guide, and that's worked on for everyone. We focus a lot on skills that are transferable, that you can take on in other jobs, in other industries. So that may be public speaking, that may be advocacy work, that may be first aid, customer service, so that if you want to move on and use Invisible Cities as a stepping stone towards other opportunities, it's also possible. And it's highly recommended, because we work on a one-to-one basis with people, trying to figure out what people want to do, whether they want to become a guide and stay a guide for years on, or if they want to maybe have full-time employment somewhere else. And I really hope and believe that Invisible Cities is just an opportunity and a positive, healthy environment where people can thrive and they can be who they are and realize that they have 1,000,001 possibilities in the world. We recruit guides through a variety of ways, mostly through other partners, so through other organizations that may be offering other services. So they may be offering food or housing or other training, employment services. And when we have training coming up, we would say to these organizations, okay, this is coming up. Who do you have that may be interesting? Not necessarily for York, but for other cities in the UK, we work quite closely with the Big Issue, for example. And that's because becoming a guide is a natural evolution from being a vendor, a magazine vendor. You may be, you know, on the street selling the Big Issue and have regular customers that you chat to, have a lovely conversation with. But becoming a guide is obviously taking that connection and relationship to the next level, where you take them on a tour for a couple of hours across this, you know, the streets that you know best. So I particularly like working with the Big Issue because guides are already full of knowledge and local knowledge and are already known within their communities, and then they kind of take that extra step to do something else. And like I said, we grew to other cities, and our plan is to grow to other cities, and that was before COVID happened, which stopped pretty much everything that we were doing. And like many other organizations in the tourism sector, it's been quite brutal and a difficult time. None of our tours are still not happening, but we're hoping that we can start again at some point in July, respecting social distancing, but also having different measures in place, like a plastic visor for the guides, but also smaller groups and safer, smaller environments. The thing that this time, lockdown and the pandemic highlighted for us was the fact that every guide, every trainee that we work with is quite innovative and wanting to do more, wanting to do different things. So we've had audio tours being created, and online content being created. So people usually taking a theme that they would talk about on their tour, but to another level, and having more written content about it or audio content about it. So people could kind of do a virtual tour experience from the comfort of their home. Today, after starting on my own, Invisible Cities is made of a team of 4, 2 of us full-time and 2 of us part-time. And we have trained over 65 people in the UK and have a current fleet of about 13 guides on a regular basis. So people come and move on and access other jobs, and that has included jobs in the retail industry, jobs in the hospitality sector, but also access full-time education. So people have started courses, whether short or long. People have moved from one city to another, and others have decided, you know, to maybe focus on that guiding wasn't quite for them. It's quite a thing to be the center of attention, so it's not necessarily for everyone, but they've had a taste of what it was like to be public speaking and to be the center of attention, and decided to do other things. So working on a one-to-one basis enables us to follow people through and to kind of give the choice to people as to what they want to do. I hope that people, after watching this talk and this video, if you're watching the recording, will go on our site, and so you can see what we do. And you can see that the feedback we get is like going on a tour with a friend. And I think that if the feeling you're left with after going on one of our Invisible Cities tour is that you have spent a couple of hours with someone who could be your friend, then we have definitely won something here, because we have broken down some of the stigma, some of the barriers that exist when it comes to thinking about homelessness in the UK and the reasons why people become homeless. So that's the one thing that comes all the time. And I think the other piece of feedback is how eloquent and how much people know about their own city, when maybe the initial reaction was that they weren't quite sure as to the level of or content or knowledge that the tours would include. And my answer to that is, you know, all our guides are so passionate about their cities and the history of them and the stories that they tell, that of course, you know, they were going to impress everyone. But that's because I go on all the tours and I know all the tours. So I think I will leave it here for myself, and I will invite Miles, who is one of our superstar guides from York, to come on and answer some questions that I've drafted for him, if that's okay, about his experience as a tour guide and what he's getting from it. Miles, are you here? Yes.
I am. Good afternoon, Zakia. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's lovely to see you at a distance. But so first off, I thought, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself and what has brought you to hear about a project like Invisible York?
Yeah, happy to do that, Zakia. My background, I'm a dad of two. I've lived in York over 30 years. Originally from Newcastle, so I chose the second best city to live in York. In my time professionally, I had a 20-year career with a global bank in various positions, mainly around the York area and North Yorkshire. After 20 years, I had an opportunity to seek another challenge. So I took up a challenge and I ran a housing scheme for the 8 councils across North Yorkshire for 4 years. That's kind of my background. Married, partner for more than 30 years. However, due to my addiction to alcohol, sadly over time that took more control over me, which resulted in me losing my house, losing my family, losing my job opportunities. Whilst I was dealing with that addiction, I was in a position where I was able to get into recovery to deal with that. But in that time, I spent 14 months living in a homeless hostel in York while I was dealing with that. I'm currently now living in supported housing with a view to independent living later this year. So it was during my time in my recovery, I was in the full-time treatment centre for 3 months, that this opportunity for the tours came up. We had somebody who came locally to introduce the opportunity. So I sat and listened. I was coming near to the end of my recovery treatment. And it was an opportunity for me to try and take hold of something and try and really start to rebuild myself alongside my recovery. So my recovery takes priority, but this was an opportunity that where I could volunteer to become a tour guide, but I have to be very respectful about the time I could spend volunteering, because I have to take care of my mental health, I have to take care of my recovery, I've got to take care of really my well-being, both physical and mental. But this was a brilliant opportunity, and I joined in with Invisible York back in March 2019, and it's really just gone from there. It's been a fantastic journey alongside my recovery journey.
Right, fantastic. And what would you say the training journey? So I explained a little bit that each guide is responsible for drafting and creating their own tour, and the content that basically the stories that you give or you tell people along the way. So how was that for you, and how did you come up with the tour that you were delivering? And then tell us a bit more about that tour.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I came in, same sort of thing as you've expressed there, Zakia. It was kind of, I'm interested in having a look at the tour, but the biggest barrier I found initially was, well, what am I actually going to talk about? I've lived in York, I understand York, I've worked there, I go out, I socialised in York, but do I really understand it? So for me, my tour is based around buildings in York, and buildings that deal with the health and wealth of York. So typically these are kind of buildings that residents, tourists will come across around York. We walk past them every day on our normal daily things, but we never actually we don't have time to sort of take a step back and look at the beauty of what we've got in York. The fantastic thing for me in York is that we've got so much knowledge, we've got so much wealth of history. There's so much about York that really people don't understand. both the fantastic tourism side, but also there's kind of an undercurrent, an underbelly of York as well, which a lot of people, quite rightly, the tourism is crucial, but there are actually, residents of York who are finding things difficult, particularly at this moment. But previously, we do have poverty here in York. We do have people who are really struggling to make ends meet. I myself was in the homeless hostel, but we know that there are people who are sofa surfing. We know people who are having to, swap places just to get somewhere to sleep. So, with my experience of homelessness, I can really resonate with how difficult. And Zakia, earlier you talked about being labelled or having a stigma. Yeah, I certainly experienced that. I'm 19 months in my recovery now, but people I've come across, because I've been here 30 years, people know that I still get that tag of there's the homeless alcoholic, even though I'm doing well in my journey on my recovery. But yeah, my tour really reflects on taking a moment to look at these buildings and look at what importance they placed on the health of York, the people of York, but also how the wealth was created in York and how that wealth was used to benefit the wider people in York. So these are buildings that I've worked in. These are buildings that I've had a drink in, or I've sat and had a meal in, or I've popped in and used them, because the buildings themselves are still there, but their actual use has changed over time. But so yeah, it was just taking that opportunity to look at buildings and just share that information with people. And as I started to delve into what the buildings actually were, what they were originally for, how they've developed, I was fortunate. I had a really good mentor, because part of the training is you have a mentor, so a kind of historical mentor, if you like, who was there to help. If I picked out a building, it was kind of, I'd like to learn a bit more about that. And it's a case of building up how you could have that small walking tour. So mine is quite a small tour, it's an hour and a half. But we talk about 15, 18 different buildings in that, in a very, very short space of time. But what I really take from it is it's really helped me establish a bit more of my, well, how can I put it really in simple terms? It's helped me regain my confidence. It's helped me re-establish some of my self-esteem. It's given me a purpose. It's actually given me the opportunity to get my life back, the life that I used to have. And for that, I'll be, forever grateful for it. But it's been fun along the way. It's been a lot of laughter, a lot of, hard work putting in, but the collaboration between all the guys in helping. So it is unique. And the best part of my tour really is the people that come on it. They ask questions. Sometimes I'll know an answer. Sometimes I haven't got a clue. But I'll take those questions away, and then I'll use those questions for the next person coming on the tour.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
Right.
What was the most, I guess, challenging or surprising thing that happened, or that, you realized it's quite a thing to train and prepare for a live tour with customers, but it's a different one to actually do it. So what was the most surprising or thing you wish you knew when you started, or funny story that happened with some of your customers on a tour?
Yeah, for me individually, and this was quite a funny one. One of my first tours, we were going to have a group of students coming up from Sheffield, and there was there are four of us in York, 4 tour guides, and the idea was that each of us would take a certain amount. So my group initially was meant to be 8 people, to take around on my tour, and the other tour guides were taking people on their tours. But actually, my tour, I arrived, and then all of a sudden, I now had 18 people to take around on my tour, because we had to do a bit of a rejig. So the first bit was like, oh hell, I thought I was prepared for 8, but now I've got 18. But do you know what? It was just fun, because the beauty of it is, although you have the knowledge of the buildings, it's actual people's questions, you know, because they sort of ask. But what I always try and do is I link in a bit of my journey or my experience. So I try and bring things in from the social side of things as well, because, you know, one of the things about rough sleeping, as an example, is we all walk past a rough sleeper. And like we all walk past these buildings, we don't take a moment to sit back and have a look, you know. With any of those rough sleepers or anybody in general, you know, there is a person behind the mask that you see looking in. And there is an individual there, you know, that could be your bank manager, it could be your brother, it could be someone you used to work with, could be someone that you went to school with who's just fallen on difficult times. But it's the variety of people that have come on the tours, and their questions really inspire me to sort of keep going. And, you know, they bring up ideas that I'd never thought of, but I can take those away, research them, and then come back and deliver hopefully a little bit better. So it's scripted to a point, but we work around the tour, and I'll answer questions where I can during it, or at the end we'll maybe do a quick sort of question and answer session.
Fantastic. And one thing I didn't mention when I spoke was that every year we try to have a get together with all the guides and trainees from all the different locations, so that you will meet and share experience. So I know the last one was in Manchester in November time, and we were meant to do one in York actually right now, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. So what do you think, or what did you think about that?
Yeah, it was, I mean, for me, the Manchester one was great. I'd already had the opportunity to go up to Edinburgh to go on Sonny's tour, one of the tour guides up there. So Gavin and I from York went up to do one of the tours. We just went on Sonny's tour to give us an idea of how our tour wanted to look like. So that was part of my development. But you know, the Manchester meeting that you mentioned, you know, that we did late last year, it was a brilliant way of us being able to sort of come together. We went on a couple of the Manchester tours, but we then spent time as a group of invisible cities and just sort of shared our own experiences of what worked well, what wasn't quite so good. We had some really funny things that have happened on people's tours, and we just, you know, we ate, we drank, we chatted. And it was brilliant picking up other little ideas that I thought, oh, I like that bit. Maybe I'll try and build that into my tour. Or people were asking me about my tour and saying, actually, I like the idea of that. I'll take that back. So it was just really nice collaboration. But it was great to see people. I know at the moment we're fortunate that we have Zooms where you can actually see people. And I know we've maintained that in the last few weeks. We've done a couple of the virtual tours from other cities. But yeah, the get-togethers are really important, because then you feel like you're part of something. You know, you have a belief that, you know, we're in that together, and we really support each other. So yeah, I take a lot from those. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And actually, you're really great at announcing my next questions. So the last couple of months have been obviously nothing like what we would have imagined. What was it like for you with the lockdown and not being able to do any tours or anything like that, but still trying to maintain things as normal as possible, I guess, and trying to stay as connected as possible online this time?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, actually, the one thing that I've learned out of this COVID situation is that how resilient people in recovery are. So people have a perception of homelessness, they have a perception of people in recovery, but actually the resilience of those people, because we have to deal with things that happen on a daily basis. We have to prepare, and we have to understand, you know, what's going to happen. And maybe the wider audience have kind of thought, oh, we're suddenly faced with things we've never had to deal with before. But you know, I found that, I mean, in my addiction, totally isolated. I didn't want to share anything with people. I didn't want to speak with people. I didn't want to interact. I didn't want to discuss anything. I just hid away. And this opportunity, this COVID situation, that would have been perfect for me to be able to go back into the old way of hiding, pretending nothing's wrong. I don't need to talk to anybody. But the beauty of this is that I've stayed connected with people. I do 1 or 2 other bits of volunteering around York as well, and that allows me to stay connected. Regards the tour, we had a chat in York along with yourself, Zakia, and what we've actually we're currently writing a virtual tour. So it's not an adaptation of one of the 4 tours that we do here in York, but we're writing a new one. So we've managed to get some new mentors in. I've brought a few friends from my recovery community in to consider becoming a guide as well. But we're creating a virtual tour. So you basically, as a consumer, you buy the tour on your phone. We're putting together audio, we're putting together visuals on there. We've been creating characters. So we've got different stops in the tour, and the narrator talks you through the tour. But at different points, we'll introduce you to a character of that time, and there'll be a conversation between the narrator and there. And that's been brilliant. You know, I've got one of the guys who's actually playing at home with a lute, and he's putting some music together. You know, it's a little bit like when he shares it with us, it's like sitting in and listening to Blackadder. So we've managed to maintain the kind of ethos of working together in York, just on a different way of doing it. So we'll still have the walking tours to do, but we've got this virtual tour that Kenny and Tash, who are the Good Organisation leads, they're sort of guiding us in putting this tour together, which hopefully, you know, we should have out in the summer at some point, so we can run that alongside the walking tours when, all being well, you know, the restrictions lessen and we can get back to that as well.
Yeah, because for everyone, I guess the hardest part was that our whole activities and everything we do is based around you and other guides meeting locals and tourists and telling a story and having that connection. So my initial fear, in all honesty, was that if we put something like a virtual tour, then we would lose some of that and we would lose what we're known for, and you know, but actually there's so many different creative things that can be done like that, which sounds absolutely fantastic, to have the character and musics and different bits put by different people, to keep that ethos and that identity. And I would like to believe that we have quite a strong identity as an organization that is a bit quirky but also personal and highlights stories and journeys. But for Manchester and Edinburgh, that's what we tried to do through those virtual tours. Did you say you did one of them?
I had the invitations for them, but I'd already was doing some other volunteering, but I'm going to have a look at them. So okay, I wasn't, so but I had something already on.
Yeah, but that's exactly that. We recorded some videos, audio files and photos, and are trying to take people on a journey through all of that at their own pace at home, so they can discover those stories, and then at a later stage organize a Zoom call to have maybe more of the personal questions come up, or maybe more of, you know, there's a particular character you really like and want more information about them. So that's worked out quite well for people, because somehow, and you know, I can understand that doing things at your own pace at home is a good thing too, because you can go back to it and kind of or replay it, you know, every so often, as opposed to just be focused live like you would have to be on a tour. So I can't wait to see what you come up with.
You may not. No, but just going back on that, Zakia, I think the other thing as well is in my initial training for the walking guide, you know, I was under no pressure. I was under no kind of time scales. It was very much, we'll support you at your pace. And that was vital for me, because it gave me that sense of, I've got some help there if I need to come and ask for it. And it was more than welcome. But it was also, there was no pressure to say, you need to be delivering by this date, you need to have this, you need to put this together. Because the tours are individual and kind of unique, someone telling you you know, your own stories. You know, if it was a script, then I don't need to be there. You can get an actor in to do that. But I try and link the tour, you know, that side of the tour just with, and I remember being the manager at this branch here, or I remember working in this office here, and this office now is a £400,000 apartment, and it used to be a council office, you know, where you wouldn't want to go in. But so that individuality is what I think distinguishes our tours from the other tours, because York's got a fantastic tourism. You know, there's loads of walking tours, but our 4 tours in York, they provide something just a little bit different, and we come at it in a different way. We don't just look at the history. We try and link a little bit in there. We link our own versions there, you know, about what it's like to live in York, because the perception again of York is very, you know, it's a very affluent area. You know, it's very desirable to come. Ask a person who lives in York, I can't live in York because it's too expensive. I have to travel to come into work. Or actually, it takes me 15 minutes to get through the tourists to get to work. And that can be a real pain. Although the tourists bring in a fantastic, significant income, for the day-to-day person in York, York looks different to what the tourists see York as. And we bring that into the 4 of us, we bring that into our individual tours, so people get to actually see a real look, a positive look, but then also a realistic look of York as a resident.
And that point is probably the most challenging thing for me from an organizational point of view, to have that balance between giving people their own pace and time and space and kind of bubble to grow, but also have something that we can put out there that means that we can have guests, we can have customers, and we can grow. And you know, taking that stand to say, well, what comes first is the guides, is the trainees, and it's people. And then if we have no tour, then we have no tour. As heartbreaking as that is, came from experience of having so many different stories and different people with different challenges. And you know, I think the quickest I've seen somebody go through that first initial bit of training and meeting to having a tour ready was probably in Glasgow in 2.5 months. And then the longest is for people in, you know, Edinburgh, who after a year are still in that process of finding out what they would like to do and how often they would like to interact and everything. And you know, as you know, of course, there's loads of different challenges that people have that sometimes we just have to work with. And that's, I think, a nice little touch to, or a nice thing, I think. And in my opinion, the only way we can really support people is to do it as per what you want and what you need, and not for me to come in and say, well, that's how it's going to be, because it's probably not going to work that way. But do tell us about the future, because I hear it's some exciting things and projects are coming up for you. So what?
For me, like I sort of alluded a little bit back, I do some other volunteering. Again, I have to be respectful of my time and you know, around my health and recovery and everything. But I'm working on a small project at the moment with people who have lived experience. And really what I mean by that is people who have actually had to deal with addiction, or had to deal with a mental health issue, had to deal with social services, had to deal with whatever range of things. But the small group that we have is about getting those people together and being able to kind of share their stories, share their journeys, and see if there are kind of ways that services and organizations could possibly support other people coming into those services in a more personalized way. So it's kind of a link between the organizations have a very professional job to do, and they do it excellently in York. And then you've got the people who are actually taking advantage of that service. But there's a kind of bit in the middle, because there's the communication of, well, we have to do it this way. And that kind of goes against what the person who's experiencing it is. But because there's not that communication between the two, so the lived experience group really is essentially supporting the people living the experience, but getting those people's experiences and sharing that information back to the organisations to say, if you just change this bit, if you tweak this bit, or if you've approached it in this way, you will get much better results from it. So it's about working alongside the organisations, because, you know, I have, and some of the guides, you know, we have our own experiences of homelessness or addiction or whatever. And I see gaps in there that I think could be very quickly improved. I've already shared some of those back in York. But, you know, gathering people's stories is so powerful, because when we can actually give somebody's story back, that's what actually makes change happen. You know, systems can be altered, systems can be amended. But if you've got a live example, so yeah, that group's really about just gathering a group of people together, being able to share our stories and coming up with some commonalities, coming up with things that can be changed quick, efficiently, not cost, but make them more personalized, rather than being treated as a statistic or treated as a, you know, we'll tick a box exercise type of thing. Actually look after the person as a person. And I think that is sadly missing. It's not the professionals are not negating that, but they're having a job to do, but they sometimes forget there is this person behind the one you're looking at. You know, that could be anybody, it could be any of us. But by being able to share our experiences better to make improvements for the next person coming in is really about that group. So that's kind of something there. But yeah, so there's plenty of opportunities out there. The one good thing I would say about York is there's so much support, there's so much help out there for people, whatever it is that they're facing. You know, I didn't have a clue for myself when I was going through my terrible times. But now I know about them, and I'm happy to share my knowledge about those other things, those other places and organisations that are available to people and to families of the people that are dealing with things. So I'm happy sharing that onwards. So yeah, I suppose in summary, I look at, you know, the way I sum up my tour at the end is my tour is around health and wealth. Yeah, I had both, I lost both, and now I'm building up, trying to get my health back and some form of wealth back, you know, and re-establishing those relationships that sadly I'd lost through my addiction.
Well, I think that's wonderful thing to finish on. I think we're having to now take some questions, if I'm not mistaken, from people who are watching us.
Great, thank you, Zakia. Thank you both. So before I lead into questions, I just want to concur. We've had some wonderful reflections from our audience, and the one I want to start with is a reflection rather than a question. And so many people that have taken the time to send questions have said what an inspiring project it is and how fantastic it has been to hear the story. Zakia, in terms of you setting it up, Miles, that authentic voice that you bring. So you talk so powerfully about stories, but you also walk the talk. And I just wanted to relay, you know, the audiences. They've used words like inspirational, fantastic, how you help yourself. So thank you to all of those people in the audience. I'm going to group my questions into three key areas as they've kind of come through. One is about the process of volunteering and how you get involved and how you get engaged. The second one focuses on, and Miles, you talk so eloquently about audiences, you know, and I want to talk about the changing nature of, you know, tourism and tourists. And then I want to finish on where next for Invisible Cities. You know, are we going to have one of these in every city? So let me start with this one around tourism. So several of the questions have been asking questions about, do you think, and this is a question to both of you, that tourism is changing, i.e. people aren't just interested in, you know, the big buildings anymore. They're interested in the history, the culture, the personal engagement and the personal stories within that. So just maybe if we kickstart with that first question. Miles.
Yeah, as I say, I launched my sort of walking tours, launched them in September. Um, and yeah, I do think there is a kind of change. We know, for me, we know the buildings, but we lost sight of them, or we didn't really understand them. But yeah, I think it's that personal touch. Um, I do see people want to hear other people's versions, not what York tourism wants to say about York. And I think that's between the four of us in York. You know, our stories are so powerful for our different journeys, and that's what things like the TripAdvisor reports. You know, one of my colleagues, Vicky, does a tour with Guy Fawkes, and she gets fantastic reports back on hers. Gavin with his family fun tour. You know, there's some brilliant stories there. So I think people are appreciating that we are a little bit different, and that's what's endearing about our tours as opposed to the more established tours.
Great, thank
Zakia?
you. Yeah, Zakia, sort of kind of reflections. I'm specifically focusing on do the people that come on these tours, you know, want to hear that story, and particularly around the tour guides themselves, you know, and their history and background, and how do they feel about that? Because you've so authentically, you know, both shared your story. How open are the volunteers and the guides in sharing their stories?
So I think the first thing, I think tourism is definitely changing. And I've seen it over the last few years already, a wish and an urge to maybe connect more personally with an individual or with people that you meet along the way, as opposed to, you know, go to a city and not meet any locals. And if you take away, you know, it could be any local, but there's definitely something that where people want to meet other people. And then a lot of people who come on the tours are definitely what I call conscious travelers. So they want to do something, but also have an impact in the communities that they visit. Especially nowadays, there's a lot of chat around the impact of tourism, and sometimes the negative impact that tourism can have in cities like Venice, Barcelona, even Edinburgh, you know, when you have crowds and crowds of people. So what can we do? What impact can we have when we visit? And I think a lot of people choose us as an option because they know that they are giving back into the community. And that's a really important way that we market ourselves, that we kind of talk about ourselves, that we are social and we are personal, but we are also professional, and we are also, you know, a really good option with 5-star reviews. That's incredibly important, I think, for everyone, because we take pride in that. But when we start training, when we start recruiting people, we try to be very, very clear, so that when some people don't want to share their personal stories, and that's absolutely fine. So we try to have those honest conversations. So we put the benchmark, we know whereabout we can, you know, we would know pretty straight away if somebody wants to talk about personal stuff and if somebody doesn't. And that's why we have a theme and also, you know, a narrative behind the tour. So we have tours like Women of Edinburgh, Crime and Punishment in the City. You know, we have a poetry tour. So there is a kind of anchor. There is something to hold on to if you don't particularly want to talk about personal things. And during that training and that mentoring process and that preparing of the tour, we try to be really clear that if people ask a question that is uncomfortable or that is something that Miles doesn't want to answer, then he doesn't have to. And I think there's loads of really polite, lovely way to say, this is my own story and I'm not happy, I'm not comfortable answering that. And 100% of the time, people are respectful of that. But in my experience, the lovely thing is that when people start, they may be quite cautious about that. And as they move along and meet more and more guests, they are more and more comfortable with answering those questions, because they realize that people are not judging them. They are curious and they want to have those conversations. You know, they want to know the answer, generally speaking. So that initial barrier that says, oh no, I don't want people to judge me, I don't want people to know this about me, is kind of removed. And that's because we've created a more personal connection.
Great, thank you. I want to get through, and we've got lots of questions. So the next one, just a short answer actually, in terms of, kind of in a sentence, because lots of questions around how can the public get involved? Is there a process for public volunteering to support your tours?
It depends what city people are in. There is a way. So, for instance, the mentoring that Miles mentioned, that people can come on board and mentor newbies, new people coming through. But also we organise community events in different parts in our city. So in Edinburgh, we run a street barber project where we give free haircuts and shaves directly from the streets, which is not relating to touring and tours, but it's something that we do for the wider community and for rough sleepers in particular, so people can get involved with that. The easiest way is to go on our site and you can see, and then there's a generic email address, so people can drop us an email and say, I'm from York and would like to help, what can I do? And then we can refer them on to the right person.
Okay, thank you. And then there's lots of offers in terms of, can you possibly setting up, in Brighton? They said it's a great place. Will there be one in London? So just, and again, in a sentence or two, what are the plans, to take this work into more, cities more widely?
The plan is the world. I always say world domination. There is, it could be rolled out in any cities in the world. The most important thing for us is to work with the right organization locally, like we work with Good Organization in York, because people need support, that one-to-one interaction locally. And unfortunately, homelessness is an issue in every city in the world. So the answer is it could be rolled out anywhere, and there's only so much we can do at our own little pace. So we had plans to launch in Cardiff. We were talking to to launch in Bristol. In London, there is a similar organisation called Unseen Tours that have been running for a while and are set up in a different way. So I don't think we will ever go to London. I would rather work in collaboration with them rather than set up something else there, and there are enough cities for all of us. But we also have plans to set up in other European cities, so that's exciting. But yeah, I think it takes time, just like it takes time for a guide to start, it takes time for a city to start. So we can watch this space and see what the future holds.
Okay, thank you. And there's several questions, particularly in relation to virtual tours, and I know that you've both talked about that, and just kind of captured that in the talk, so I'm not going to necessarily come back to that one. And I thought the explanation that you gave about, given COVID-19 and lockdown, the stance that you've taken, which is a really important one. I'm conscious of time, so I want to go back to a personal question, Miles, and it's a really pertinent question raised by one of the audiences, and it was in relation to, what was it? What was your turning point that made you decide, okay, I'm going to do things differently?
My turning point, I really had to re-establish my own life. I'd lost my life in very simple terms. So in part of my recovery, I needed to have something to hope for. I needed a purpose. I needed a reason. I needed to get my dignity back. I needed to understand my humility, because in my active addiction, I wasn't a very nice person. So I needed to do something about that. This opportunity gave me that chance to rebuild it, and I still work that from today, and I will be doing tomorrow and next week and the following week. So it's an ongoing thing, but it's having a belief. It's actually having someone to believe in you when you really don't believe in yourself. And that's what Zakia and Invisible Cities gave me the opportunity to do.
Okay, thank you. Zakia, before I close and say votes of thanks, there are a couple of questions particularly, and if it's possible to answer them in a sentence or two, something about how the guides are contracted, and what do they get in return for their time?
That's a very good question. Like we work on a one-to-one basis with people, we will also work on a one-to-one basis on that subject. Some people, for instance, if they've are selling the big issue, can be self-employed, and doing the tours becomes another way of generating income. People can be volunteering. We are conscious that we need to work with the circumstances of people, if they are on certain type of benefits, if they are, at different stages in their life. So we are small enough as an organization that we can do that. So we have all shapes and forms: people who are self-employed, people who are going through payroll, people who are volunteering, people who are thinking about it, and that's okay for now. But yeah, so it really depends on what else is going on in the life of our guides.
Thank you. Zakia Miles, can I thank you on behalf of the University of York and the audience for what's been a really thought-provoking, reflective and authentic discussion. I was struck, Miles, with a final comment that you made about, giving back and sharing and giving back those stories is what creates real change. And in both of your presentations, I was struck by how you put passion to work, the importance of passion in terms of being persuasive in bringing about that change, and the persistence that takes. So thank you for walking the talk and making such a difference. It's needed, so acutely when we deal with issues of homelessness, addiction, in ways that you show an inspiring solution rather than, just simply saying what the issues and the problems are. So to the audience, thank you so much for participating. Just a couple of things to finish on. Just to note that all the tours are currently suspended, but thankfully in all our cities, invisible city guides, at least are in temporary accommodation at the moment, so they're able to stay safe. But like all of the things that are happening in the world at the moment, but because the tours aren't happening, there are financial implications. So if you would like to help in terms of raising money to provide weekly food, household items for the guides, then please do so by looking at the link that's in our chat function, and we can also email the link to you afterwards. So there's practical ways that you can support and continue to engage in the project. If you want to hear the discussion and the debate again or share it more widely, the recording of this event will be available on the Festival York YouTube channel. This can be accessed and you can watch it again in the section on the festival website, but just be mindful it will take a couple of days before it appears. And then finally, we do hope that you will continue to be engaged with York's Festival Ideas, because as you've seen today, it helps bring important issues to life and shows work that is making a genuine difference. So if you want to find out more, please check out the website, which is yorkfestivalofideas.com. For further details of all of our events, you'll be able to see that on the festival programme. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on these events and to continue the conversation. And you can do that by using the hashtag YorkIdeas. So just to conclude then, thank you so much to our inspiring speakers for the difference that you are making and will continue to make, and for the audience for their thoroughly reflective and engaging questions and the discussion that we've had. Thank you all.